content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
What's good people? I'm GG, man. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers, man. And so, I want to know if you can hear me right now. If you can hear me, man, please put a 1 in the chat. Just do that for me if you can hear me. If you can't hear me, you won't put anything out there. But if you can hear me, put a 1 in the chat. Okay, cool. All right, we good. There's something going on with my OBS. That mug ain't acting right, but we ain't gonna worry about that right now. What I am going to do is give a shout out to all the members of the Green Gorilla channel and then proceed as usual. All right, so let me get that process started right now, man. Big up to Tahuti, Gold Professor, Brotherly Love 215, Lee Ways. Hold on, let me turn this music off, man. Let me turn the music off, man. Because for some reason, the input going to OBS is not working properly. I apologize for the technical difficulty. I haven't been on the computer for a while, so I guess it wants to stutter step and start tripping right now. But anyway, shout out to Tahuti, Gold Professor, Brotherly Love 215, Lee Ways, Night Raven, DF, Aaron Peters, Travis, Zanco. Big up to Barnolas, J. Cleveland Green, hiphop.catv, Dar, Lord Hamal, Michael Ross, Vincent Lindsay, Michael Price, Beautiful Trauma, Quiz the Poet, Black Quizzard ADOS, Jazz Tech, Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Big Said, Nasiana, Kyle J. Sura, Kareem, Troy Warren, Blacksword 404, Jeff R., Mrs. KP Bailey, Cutting Up with the Jones, Ricky Dawson, Alan Wiley, The Face, Mantis on Break, Electrician 480, Life of Commerce, Julius Ferguson, True 7360, Herbert Lewis, D. Scott, Marvin Evans, A. Wilson's Ghost, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., Mark Holt, John J., The IDP Expressions, Afro Troop TV, Adam, BGS Ibmore, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Papa Didas, Scott Haywood, Black Uru Strikes, Dr. Tree 33, Leroy Honeycutt, Broken Blades, Super Tech 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karan S., Anthony Davis, Donnell 360, Seven Coast Dojo, Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Patricia Colley, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Cameron 87, Doc LaRock, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donna Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, Angels Jules, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, ML Law, Universal 178, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, Beware of the Revelator, Aaron Infinite, and Dr. Tiasan Johnson. Big up to those persons, man. Thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel. I can't forget my brothers Forrest Windu, David Carroll, and Kevin Samuels. Big up to them as well, man. May they rest in heaven. Also, a big up to all the people on the Patreon side. That includes Rock One, Judah Arenda, Albert C., Dr. Ben Vincent, J. Cleveland Green, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Lamont Latimer, William Joyner, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Jason Warren, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, Any You, and Asangwa. Big up to those persons, man. Thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel and helping me to keep things afloat over here, man. I appreciate that. Word up. And let me just get right into what it is I'm trying to get into right now, man. I don't want to delay for too long. All right, now this is not going to be super, tantalizing. I'm not going off. What I want to do is what I said I was going to do the last time I was on, and basically that's discussing what masculinity is and what's being said about it in the academy, blogs, and social media by the progressive and the woke crowd. My intention was to do a show the day after, and, things popped up, and so I had to delay. But I'm ready to read it now. So what I want to do is read and react to the first part of the first chapter of an individual by the name of Raywin Connell in their book called Masculinities, okay? And I think we're going to go ahead and do that now. But before I do that, I want to try one thing with OBS real quick to see if I can't actually get it to do what I want it to do in relation to getting my my vocal visualizer popping like I want it to, man. It ain't, I ain't seeing I'm not seeing the setting to do what I would like for them to do. So let me see if I can get that going real quick. If I can't, it is what it is. Check, 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 1, 2. Is it coming on? It's not. All right, man. Check, 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 1, 2, 1, 2. Still not doing it. It's pissing me the fuck off is what it's doing. But, oh well. It is what it is, okay? It is what it is. This shit it's always something, man. Always something. Bear with me 1 second while I try to figure out what the fuck is going on with this damn thing, man. Anyway, man, you're just not gonna have the opportunity to see the voice meter go up and down. And I don't think that's a big issue. If it is an issue, I apologize for it. But anyway, let me just get right into this. So I'm gonna share the screen and get right into this shit. Chrome tab. Actually a window. Masculinities. Bam. There we go. You should be able to see it. Cool. Anyway, this book is called, I'm not going to read the introduction because that shit is long. I'll be doing it forever. So the name of the book is entitled Masculinities. And it's the second edition, and it's written by an individual by the name of Raywin Connell. You can see pictures of men there, all different kinds of men from different cultures and societies, whatever the case may be. Again, the name of the book is Masculinities. It's not masculinity, it's masculinities. All right? So let's just get right into this shit. I'm only going to read like the first 15 or so pages because I'll be reading all day, and I don't want to do that. All right? But I think we can learn something from this. At least we can know what's being said about what masculinity is, because oftentimes we talk about masculinity without actually defining it or putting some sort of, precise definition about what it actually is. So let's just do that. And maybe, and by the way, just to let you know, Raywin Connell is a trans woman. All right? Just so if you didn't know, I'm letting you know right now. All right, so chapter 1 is entitled The Science of Masculinity. And the subtitle is Rival Knowledges. And of course, I will be commenting and reacting. I have not read this. So I will be reacting as I read, okay? I have not read this. But I'm going to continue to react as I read, okay? Just to let you know. And he said, Lord Juno says, Amiri keeps making videos claiming he's debunked you in BGS. I'm still waiting on him to learn how to read stats in general. Hey, bro, I'm not having a conversation with Amiri anymore. I'm not trying to debunk or support or endorse anything that has nothing to do with an individual who really actually hasn't done the work. You can't read John Locke or Thomas Hobbes or read, blog pieces and come to me with pitter patter in terms of research and then, asserted to me is if you actually understand it to the same extent that I do. I'm a specialist in it. I went to school for this. I'm an expert in it. So there's not really much he can tell me. Now, he might have a different opinion, okay? But at the end of the day, you know, what's your orientation and where did you get your orientation from? That's my viewpoint. Like, if you have an orientation towards a particular area of information, you have to be well read. You just can't read what's popular and then regurgitate it to me and think that, you know, that you're actually saying something profound. That's some bullshit to me. I will dance circles around the average individual as it pertains to social and political philosophy. That's just the reality of the situation. Now, either you can accept it or reject it. It's on you. But I mean, you know, I've been down this rabbit hole on more times. I mean, in more times than I would really actually like to admit. I mean, for one, we've already had a discussion about violence and who actually commits acts of violence in the black community and in the world in general. I mean, to argue that women are not violent at all and that, you know, the only source of violence in intimate partner relationships is patriarchy. That's the only source of it. That's just absolute bullshit. We have 40 years of social scientific research that demonstrates that women are just as likely as men in intimate partner relationships to commit acts of violence. So the whole violent, I'm oppressed because of the violence and all of this is absolutely absurd. And secondly, in relation to the mimetic thesis that, you know, all black men want to do is be white men. I mean, just take a fucking look around you, bro. Who's actually trying to be white? Who's trying to occupy white spaces? Predominantly. Who's trying to basically demonstrate their value and their worth by proximity to whiteness in relation to the jobs they have and the education they have? Who the fuck is actually literally being close to whiteness? Is it black men? For the most part, we already know who worked in the house most often on the plantations. Was it black men or were they mostly in the fields doing the menial labor? We already know white women required black women to be in the house so that their children can be breastfed and cook and clean and work around, you know, in a domestic, capacity. So to argue, you know, that like all black men want to do is white men, that's just some bullshit, man. Absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So, and then when it comes to sexual assault, because the federal government for the most part has changed the definition of what rape is. Now, you know, men are included in it. I guarantee you within the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to see the numbers for men being sexually assaulted skyrocket. Because now we're beginning to actually count the data. So I don't want to hear all this bullshit about, well, I proved that, you really want to be a white dude. Like, how the fuck you going to tell me what the average black man wants to be? He wants to be a white guy and have the power of a white guy. Where's the literature on this shit? Where's the proof of it other than in some blog pieces and shit? Where is it? There is none. So anyway, man, let's get to this shit, man. And if I got some, moderators out there, make sure that bullshit that's in the chat gets expunged and, gets deleted. Because I'm seeing some naked girls bullshit come in. And I don't desire to see that. Yeah, I mean, hey, keep it 100, man. Look, that's the point, man. You call black men powerless, and then if they actually have an ambition to gain some modicum of power, then they're trying to replicate the power of the white imperial regime. They want to engage in participation in a scheme whereby they create the same conditions of colonialism, slavery, Jim Crow, segregation. Black men aren't even imagining these things. It's not even in their mental Rolodex. So for anyone to say that is fucking absurd. He's been reading too many feminist blogs. It's absolutely fucking absurd. And I don't have time to talk to guys like that. I really don't. Because they're not really trying to get to the truth. They're just trying to push an ideological viewpoint. At least I'm willing to research and go over other people's arguments to see what they have to say. Now, either I can, say that some of it has some truth to it, or none of it has truth to it. Or that, the framework is, a little fucked up. But I mean, come on, man. I'm not entertaining that bullshit. But anyway, so the subtitle starts off rival knowledges. Okay? So, Raywin Connell starts off by saying the concepts masculine and feminine, Freud observed in a melancholy footnote, are among the most confused that occur in science. In many practical situations, the language of masculine and feminine raises few doubts. We base a great deal of talk and action on this contrast. But the same terms, on logical examination, waver like the Danube mist. They prove remarkably elusive and difficult to define. Why should this be? In the course of this book, I will suggest that the underlying reason is the character of gender itself, historically changing and politically fraught. Everyday life is an arena of gender politics, not an escape from it. Now, the first thing that you should be aware of, the first claim being made, okay, the first thesis is gender itself changes historically. And there are contestations about what it is related to politics. So understand that. That's the first thing that, the author is basically pointing us in direction to in relation to a thesis. That gender itself is in flux, is fluid, okay? And the author goes on to say gender terms are contested because the right to account for gender is claimed by conflicting discourses and systems of knowledge. Okay, so people contest gender terms related to conflicting discourses and ways of gathering information. Okay, and the author goes on to say we can see this in everyday situations as well as in high theory. On the desk in front of me is a clipping from a local newspaper in Sydney, The Glade, headed, "Why Women Ask the Way." And I guess the script from it is, women are more likely to stop someone in the street and ask for directions than men simply because the sexes think differently. Women are more likely to stop someone in the street and ask for help than men because the sexes think differently. The story bylined Amanda Park quotes a psychologist and a counselor, Mary Beth Longmore, explaining that the sexes have different purposes when they speak. It goes on to say, this article does, women also don't understand that men view having information as a form of hierarchy. So people with more information are further up the hierarchy. Ms. Longmore said it was for this reason that men tended not to ask a stranger for directions because it was admitting that they were in some way inferior. Oh, man. Shout out to Jay Rizzle, man. Thank you so much for the donation. All right. Appreciate that. So, I guess the first instance in which, the author is trying to demonstrate that there's some sort of common sense understanding in most of the public, even in Australia, because the author is from Australia, okay? There's a common sense attitude in our culture, Western culture in general, that women and men are different, okay? They have gender differences, and it even introduces itself into the way that women ask for help and men are unwilling to ask for help. Because not to know something is a sign of your lack of masculinity. Now, I'm just saying this, bruh. Look, man, real talk. If you go to the mall and you don't know where a store is, Or you going to go to the legend and try to figure it out? And if you see a fucking security guard in the mall somewhere, are you not going to ask where the story is? Like, I mean, I know, like, this is a typical idea about, like, a man getting lost, driving with his wife. His wife says, pull over and ask the gas station clerk where we're going, because he might have got lost or some shit like that. And instead of him just admitting that he's lost, he's going to insist that he knows where the fuck he's going and stay lost, because it's an indication that he's less than masculine by not knowing where the place is in the first place. So, I mean, this is the argument being made, not necessarily by the author, but it is proposed by a clipping from a local newspaper that he's reading, okay? Or the author is reading, okay? And the author is a trans woman, by the way, okay? Just so you know, I'm not concealing this, okay? Now, personally, if I don't know where the fuck I'm going, I'm gonna ask somebody who knows from the geographical location that I'm in. If I'm in a new city and I don't know where I'm going, I might stop and ask some cats on the block. I might stop, if the police next to me, I'm gonna ask the police, where is what I'm looking for? I'm not gonna fucking dick around and play games and act like I'm a man, even when I don't know where the fuck I'm going. So that's bullshit. The article to me is some bullshit. That's just me though. I don't know about y'all. You might refuse to ask for help about locations and where you need to go. I would not do that because I'm not insecure like that. That's stupid to me. But anyway, readers wishing to understand the different languages men and women speak are invited to a workshop conducted by Miss Longmore on the following Friday. Local newspapers are always short of news, but this item struck me as exceptionally helpful, at least for clarifying types of knowledge about gender. In the first place, it appeals to common sense knowledge. I said that. Men and women act differently. I know men in this space say that shit all the time. We say it all the fucking time. Men and women act differently. Do they? This is what we're about to delve into, because a lot of motherfucking common, sense arguments are presented. A lot of assumptions and propositions are made. But the reality is, if there is a difference in terms of behavior and attitudes and mental, capacities or mental proclivities, what are they? And what is the science that backs this shit up? That's what I'm interested in learning and investigating, okay? So anyway, in the first place, it appeals to common sense knowledge. Men and women act differently. Women are more likely to stop someone, and they act differently because they are different. The sexes think differently. Without this appeal to all commonly acknowledged polarity, the story would not work at all. So, I mean, the author is just pointing out here, I guess, there's a common sense polarity about, what we generally think about the sexes and how they behave and how they act, even how they think. The sexes think differently, okay? But the report also criticizes common sense. So on one hand, it appeals to common sense, but on the other hand, it is critical of common sense. Men and women often don't understand each other's purpose in speaking. Women also don't understand blah, blah, blah. The criticism is made from the standpoint of a science. Miss Longmore is identified as a psychologist. She refers to her knowledge as findings, and she enters a typical scientific caveat at the end of the item. Her findings were true of the majority, but not all men and women. Science thus revises common sense knowledge of gender difference. The revision warrants a new practice, which will be explored in the workshop. The nature of the science is not specified, but it seems likely that Ms. Longmore's claims are based on her stated experience as a counselor. In this short item, we can see two forms of knowledge about masculinity and femininity. On the one hand, you have common sense, and then on the other, you have psychological science, partly reinforcing each other, partly at odds. We also get a glimpse of two practices in which psychological knowledge is produced and applied: individual counseling and group workshops. So the author goes on to say, in a more indirect fashion, the story leads us to other forms of knowledge about masculinity and femininity. Workshops are widely used by therapists in the milieu that gave birth to the contemporary men's movement. Now, we're not going to even go as far into this, reading this, to get to chapter 9. We're not even going there. But I know that what she's talking about, or, and I'm just being respectful by saying that, okay? But Connell's discussion of the men's movement is a discussion of the mythopoeic men's movement, okay? Now, if you don't know what the mythopoeic men's movement is, go look it up, okay? This movement claims a knowledge beyond both science and common sense, an intuitive knowledge of the deep masculine. Like, we've even referred to sacred masculinity and all of that kind of shit. Like, what does this actually mean? A philosopher is going to want clarity, okay? What does it mean to have common sense knowledge about masculinity or femininity? What's the psychological literature on masculinity and femininity? What does it mean to have intuitive knowledge about masculinity or femininity? What do those things actually mean? But at any rate, moving on. But if pressed on the question of sex differences, psychologists and journalists would probably more appeal to biology. Okay, so here we go. First off, the psychologists and journalists would more probably appeal to biology if they are pressed on questions about what's different about the sexes. They might recall research on sex differences in bodies and behavior, brain sex, hormonal differences, and genetic coding. These too have become staple media stories. Now, look, bruh, let me just say this, man. There's no denying that, I would define a male as someone who's born with a penis. I would define a female as someone who's born with a vagina and a uterus. Typically, because there are, intersex genders, intersex people. I ain't gonna say genders, but there are people who are born intersex, but those are like abnormal. That's not the norm. He has an outie, she has an innie. I mean, this is just simple shit to me, okay? But let's keep going down the rabbit hole. If the Glade went in for investigative journalism and the writer stepped across Parramatta Road to Sydney University, she would find that these views of masculinity and femininity, uncontroversial in the biological sciences, are fiercely contested in the human and social sciences. And that's a fact. Because the whole idea about what's different between men and women, what's the difference between masculinity and femininity, there is no agreement amongst scholars in the biological sciences and the people who do social science and people who do, who are experts in the humanities. There's a difference there. Now, I would say that most of what you see, even in social science related to masculinity and femininity, is going to be political. And it's going to largely be ideological, even philosophical to some extent. They're going to borrow from post-structuralist thought and talk about how binaries, infer a dominant binary part of the binary and a subordinate part, and they want to explode that because, in juxtaposing opposites, there has to be a top and a bottom. There has to be a superior and an inferior. But, you know, I'm not going to even go into that right now. Anyway, on those parts of the campus, academics talk about sex roles or gender relations and speak of masculinity and femininity being socially constructed or constituted in discourse. So on the one hand, you got biology. On the other hand, you have sociality, okay? That gender is a matter of social construction, or it comes out of a discourse, okay? And I didn't put you in the timeout, Micah. I didn't put anybody in the timeout, okay? So I apologize if, you know, anybody's being put in timeout or whatever the case may be. Know that it's not me. But if one of my moderators did it, they probably did it for a reason. So just, you know, be chill out here. Anyway, biologists and social scientists alike, after leaving Sydney University and turning right down Parramatta Road, drive past a soot-stained church. The vicar of St. Barnabas proclaims to the world, via a well-known billboard, that the gender order is ordained by God, and like other parts of the moral order, is perilous to tamper with. So don't fuck with the gender order established by God. That's what the church is basically saying. The divine billboard, in turn, is answered on signs put up by the publican of the hotel on the opposite side of the highway. The publican frequently comments on the scriptural passages or messages from the point of view of an earthly, working-class hedonism. I could offer more examples, but these are perhaps enough. Our everyday knowledge of gender is subject to conflicting claims to know, to explain, and judge. These forms of knowledge are, as the Glabe article showed, connected with particular social practices. This is generally true of knowledge, though intellectual debates are often conducted as if ideas fell from the sky. So, I mean, this claim here, all the author is trying to do is establish that the accumulation of knowledge, or how we come to say that we know something, is a social process. Okay? So this is going to be a critique. I've heard it before. You know, like somebody today, I think it was Ian Graves. He sent me I guess it was a blog post where you got a math teacher who basically says that 2 + 2 = 4 is oppressive, it's patriarchal knowledge, and we need to depart from it, which to me is absolutely fucking absurd. Like, okay. So now we're going to get rid of the conventionality of mathematics and argue that that shit is even in flux. Okay, well, I would say, all right, bitch, when you're cooking, don't pay attention to measurements and proportionality in relation to it, just fucking abandon it. Ask your doctor to not pay attention to how much fucking dosages of medicine you're supposed to get. Because if 2 + 2 don't = 4, now how the fuck we gonna have some understanding about measurement, weight, and mass? I mean, I'm just saying, man. I mean, this is just absolutely, the shit is absolutely ridiculous, man. It's like, I understand the argument that science is a social process. I get that. Now, I'm just going to let you know, I will reveal that as it pertains to science in and of itself, and I've taught the philosophy of science, I am what philosophers would call an anti-realist instrumentalist. But that's as far as I'm going down that road, okay? I'm an anti-realist instrumentalist. So I think that, using science, it bears fruit. It offers rewards. But it is socially constructed to a certain extent. The ideas, the laws, the principles, they are to some extent, socially constructed. And they are changing. If they weren't changing, then there would never be any scientific revolutions. And in terms of what we know about the universe, in terms of matter, we only know a little bit about it. We don't know what dark matter is. We don't know what dark energy is. So there's a lot about the world, even the physical world, that we don't know. All right. So we have to be open enough, I think, to revise our theses or our hypotheses about what the nature of reality is. We got to be open-minded. All right. So that's why I'm an anti-realist instrumentalist. But anyway, this is generally true of knowledge, though intellectual debates are often conducted as if ideas fell from the sky. The sociology of knowledge showed 2 generations ago how major worldviews are based on the interests and experiences of major social groups. Research on the sociology of science, giving fascinating glimpses of laboratory life and prestige hierarchies among scientists, has revealed the social relations underpinning knowledge in the natural sciences. The point is reinforced by Michel Foucault's celebrated researches on power knowledge, the intimate interweaving of new sciences such as medicine, criminology, and sexology with new institutions and forms of social control, clinics, prisons, factories, psychotherapy, okay? So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. If you want me to unpack it, I will. I mean, but ultimately what's being asserted here is that, you know, when people engage in scientific inquiry, they are directed by big money, by big business, oftentimes by governments. So, I mean, everything that is investigated in relation to science is not always neutral or impartial. Sometimes, you know, there is a great deal of political pressure for a particular form of inquiry to take place. And then there's hierarchy within the systems of scientific, you know, research in and of itself. I'm not going to deny that. But I mean, at the end of the day, man, I am not going to deny also what biologists have to say about everything related to sex, just because scientific inquiry is social. If that's the case, everything is fucking social. Then there is no truth at all. And everything is to be explained in relation to power. And certain things are. But I mean, come on, man. As it pertains to the fact that there's a difference, a biological difference between what we consider to be male and female, to me, to even have to go into this is fucking absurd to me. To me, it's absurd. Let me put this in read mode, man. And then not only that, let me put this in the full screen mode. No, let me get that out of full screen mode. It makes it smaller. All right. And then another question I would have is this. If you have a reservation about what scientists have to say about biology, why are so many trans people going to fucking medical doctors in order to have sex reassignment surgery? I mean, why? If you don't trust what these scientists are saying, to some degree, then what the fuck are you going to them for? But anyway, the author says, I could offer more examples, blah, blah, blah. I did that already. Okay, so the conflicting forms of knowledge about gender betray the presence of different practices addressing gender. To understand both everyday and scientific accounts of masculinity, we cannot remain at the level of pure ideas, but must look at their practical basis. So we can't just look at ideas. So we have to move from the analytic and just thinking about it in terms of ideas, and we actually have to do, I guess, some sort of empirical research. I guess that's where this motherfucker's going. I don't know. Anyway, for instance, common sense knowledge of gender is by no means fixed. It is, rather, the rationale of the changing practices through which gender is done or accomplished in everyday life. Practices revealed in elegant research by ethnomethodologists. The knowledge of gender deployed by Sigmund Freud and Mary Beth Longmore is intimately connected with a professional practice, the practice of psychotherapy. The knowledge offered by constructions in the social sciences has a twofold genealogy, stemming from the oppositional politics of feminism and gay liberation, and from the techniques of academic social research. Okay? So if you want to know where the social constructionist knowledge comes from, it comes from feminism and gay liberation politics. That's knowledge. Okay, and look, okay, all right. But the knowledge of gender utilized by people like Sigmund Freud and Mary Beth Longmore, who are psychologists, they get knowledge from the practice of psychotherapy, okay? Now, I mean, this is a little bit misleading because not all psychologists abide by and, fully or wholeheartedly endorse the practices of Sigmund Freud. Like, Sigmund Freud is antiquated, bruh. Like, who the fuck? I mean, not to say that psychotherapy is not a thing, but this is a conflation right here. I can see that right now. Like, just because you're a psychologist doesn't mean you're employing the psychological methodology of Sigmund Freud. That's some bullshit. But anyway, accordingly, in discussing the main attempts to construct knowledge about masculinity, I will ask what practices enabled that knowledge to emerge. I will also ask how the practices shape and limit the forms that knowledge takes. So in other words, information or knowledge that we have about what masculinity is, she wants to observe the context in which that knowledge was developed. Okay? And I'm assuming that, it's going to be because white dudes developed it, there's going to be some bias within it. Okay? And it's going to be limited in the scope and range of its truthfulness. Okay? That's what I'm assuming. All right? The different forms of knowledge do not stand on an equal footing. In most contexts, scientific claims have an undeniable edge. In the that's a matter of dispute. Because it seems to me nowadays it doesn't matter what science actually says about the matter. It matters what people in the humanities and the social sciences have to say about it. But whatever. In most contexts, scientific claims have an undeniable edge. In the Gleb report, just a whiff of scientificity was enough to establish a right to criticize common sense knowledge. Common sense did not criticize science. So in other words, there's a power dynamic between science and common sense. There's a difference, a political difference. Those who are scientists stand in a hierarchical relationship to the average person, the common sense person. And man, that's just the way shit is, bruh. I mean, we could talk about the political implications of social research and how it's directed and who, guides it and pushes it in one direction or another. That's a valid question, okay? It's a valid investigation. But God damn it, bruh. If I want to take my, car to a jackleg motherfucking mechanic that's a crackhead, he might know some shit because he was a mechanic. But come on, man. In certain matters, I'm going to go to the fucking expert. And I'm going to give him preferential treatment in relation to, my estimation of his worth of knowledge in a specific area. Who you going to go to? The jackleg mechanic? Or you going to go to the motherfucking certified mechanic? Especially, it's one thing to talk about a motherfucking jackleg putting brakes on your car. It's another thing for that motherfucker to rebuild your engine or start fucking around with the transmission. If I want to know, you know, if I get, like my man say, Lord Juno, if I got plaque in my heart, I'm gonna go to a fucking cardiologist, not a fucking, you know, a homeopathic medicinal guru. That's just me. You might choose differently, but I'm gonna go see the motherfucking doctor at John Hopkins or some shit like that. I'm not fucking around with Dr. Sabi. You might do differently, but fuck that, man. I'm not gonna drink my own urine and shit and think it's gonna cure my motherfucking cardiac problems. If I have them, knock on wood. Anyway, the different forms of knowledge do not stand on an equal footing, and I don't think they should. But in most contexts, scientific claims have an undeniable edge. You got a whiff of scientificity, it's enough to establish a right to criticize common sense knowledge. So you can common sense knowledge is put up to scrutiny, whereas science is not. Science has a definite hegemony in our education system and in media. I mean, come on, like, I'm just saying, should it not? And I've heard people make a reference to this, how, you know, we really can't, even Amiri said this shit. He said, well, we can't really trust science because science can be manipulated in any kind of way, especially the social sciences, one can argue, in order to make any point or to validate any viewpoint. So you have racist social science, and not to say that there hasn't been. You have sexist social science. You have anti-queer or anti-gay social science or whatever the case may be. But all of these are aberrations because science in and of itself is a hegemonic discourse. My viewpoint on this issue is, look, if someone is cooking the books scientifically, if their methodology is not sound, the way you critique it is through more science, better science, more impartial and objective science. At one point, what I was about to do was give you my entire course on the philosophy of science, but only like 300 or 400 motherfuckers watch these videos, so I stopped doing it. I just stopped it. I'm like, fuck this, man. I'm spending like 2 to 3 hours making these short videos and nobody's watching them. But everybody's a fucking logical expert and knows something about science. I said, fuck it. I'm not doing it anymore. Everybody was, like caked and baked into these bitches is this, these bitches is that. I'm like, man, fuck this. I'm not, because I did like animated videos on it. Because it's critical that we know this, in my viewpoint. But if you don't want to know it, fuck it. That's how I feel about it. Shout out to BGS, man. Thank you for the donation, bro. Also, shout out to Michael Ross. Appreciate that, brother. Appreciate that. But I'm not going to be busting my ass making, because that shit is labor intensive. To make a 3-hour animated video, that shit, a 6-minute animated video, that shit could take like 4 to 5 hours. I'm not doing that for motherfuckers who don't want to watch it, but then claim to know every goddamn thing about it. I'm not doing it. And please get rid of this love chat bullshit. Please get rid of that. At any rate, moving on. This has shaped the development of ideas about masculinity throughout the 20th century. All the leading discourses make some claim to be scientific or to use scientific findings. However grotesque the claim may be. Even Robert Bly in Iron John uses scientific language for his gripping idea that 1/3 of our brain is a warrior brain and that our DNA carries warrior instincts. Now, look, I don't know the Robert Bly that, Connell is making reference to. Scientists make claims all the time. But the point is that when you engage in scientific inquiry, you use a method where people can trace the steps of your scientific inquiry or your investigation into a matter and either themselves confirm it, falsify it, accept it, confirm it. At least there's a methodology that you can go back to and retrace the steps of that individual researcher and determine whether or not what it is that they're saying is valid. I'm a firm believer in the fact that, in the point that, and you would know this if you actually listen to what I had to say in the long run about scientific inquiry in the first place. But to me, it doesn't matter where a hypothesis comes from. You can make a guess. It doesn't matter. You can be a fucking mystic and make a guess about the nature of reality. You can base it on your fucking politics. You can base it on your religion. You can base it on anything. I don't care how you develop your hypothesis. What I care about is the method that you use to either confirm or falsify your hypothesis. That's all I care about. What instruments do you use? What kind of research methodology are you using? Is the research methodology that you're using sound? Is it based on clear, concise, inductive principles? Can others retrace your steps using the same instruments that you utilized? Whether they be psychological instruments or whether they be, like the kind of instruments that chemists use. Like beakers and flasks and weight and heat and temperature and shit like that. Like, I don't care what you say as long as you can prove what you say or demonstrate what you say is true. Doesn't matter. So, like the whole idea that, a group of people came up with certain scientific principles, whatever. It's up for you to show that their methodology was wrong. Not that because there's a power relationship there, that what they say because they were in power is just innately false. Now, has there been some bad science out there? Sure. You're always going to have bad science out there. But the method is a self-correcting method. That's what it's supposed to be. Self-correcting. But anyway, the appeal to science plunges us into circularity. For it has been shown in convincing historical detail that natural science itself has a gendered character. Okay. Western science and technology are culturally masculinized. Okay. Okay. All righty. So science is gendered. Scientific inquiry is gendered. And to some extent, I can see how the author would say this. Because, if you look at Sir Francis Bacon and what he had to say about the nature of scientific inquiry, he wrote a book called The Novum Organum, which loosely, translates into the new way of doing things, the new science, the new method. He said that, we could use science to torture nature for her secrets because nature is perceived as female or was characterized as female. Okay. Nature itself. That's why we say mother nature. So scientific inquiry is an attempt, the way these social scientists put it, is a way to conquer nature. But I would say, let's face it, man, nature is fucking harsh. Why would you not try to conquer certain aspects of it? What we was supposed to go back to fucking what? The pre-industrial era? I don't think it is a way back. I don't think we should, engage in technology to the point where we destroy the nature itself, but goddamn. Like, I mean, I love my air conditioning. I like my Wi-Fi. Put a 1 if you like your Wi-Fi, man. I mean, you can't say the science has not improved to some extent. I mean, it's caused some harm. There's been some drawbacks, but goddamn, there's been a lot of good that has come out of scientific inquiry. We found a way to have a vaccine for polio and measles and the mumps and shit, which was killing motherfuckers. I mean, some good has come out of science. Kevlar. I mean, goddamn. But I mean, all she's trying to do, or the author's trying to do, is point out, the power and the gender of scientific inquiry. That's the point she's trying to make, and I'm being generous by, using the right pronoun. Anyway, Western science and technology are culturally masculinized. This is not just a question of personnel, though it is a fact that the great majority of scientists and technologists are men. The guiding metaphors of scientific research, the impersonality of its discourse, the structures of power and communication in science, the reproduction of its internal culture, all stem from the social position of dominant men in a gendered world. I knew this was the course this shit was gonna take. I knew that this was the course that this shit was about to take. No doubt in my mind. But the funny thing about this is, in the ancient world, before the destruction of the Library of Alexandria by Bishop, I think his name was Cyril, before his destruction of the Library of Alexandria, the main high priestess of science at the library was fucking Hypatia. That's a woman. Go look it up. She was the head honcho at the Library of Alexandria when a fucking Roman Catholic priest destroyed it and quartered and racked her ass and flayed her flesh off in the streets, and they called her a witch because she was using not an astrolabe, but she was using some damn instrument. It's common, now, but back then it was some shit like it allowed her to prognosticate when certain celestial events were going to take place, and Cyril thought it was witchcraft or some shit like that, and so they destroyed the Library of Alexandria and quartered and racked her and cut her flesh off in the streets. Don't know if she was white or black, Travis. Can't really say. But I do know that she was the head honcho and she was engaged in scientific inquiry. So he's talking about, or the author is talking about, a culturally specific moment in time about scientific inquiry in the Western world. Like, during the era of Enlightenment or thereafter. I'm pretty sure. Okay, so anyway, the dominance of science in discussions of masculinity thus reflects the position of masculinity or specific masculinities in the social relations of gender. So in other words, because it's dudes who have a certain amount of power that are developing these theories and are conducting inquiry into the nature of what masculinity is, it's going to basically give preference to masculinity. It's going to somehow be partial and favor the side of masculinity. That's the point that's going to be made here. Okay? That's the point that's going to be made here. All right? In that case, what can be expected from a science of masculinity, being a form of knowledge created by the very power it claims to study? Any such knowledge will be as ethically compromised as a science of race created by imperialists, or a science of capitalism produced by capitalists. There are indeed forms of scientific talk about masculinity that have capitulated to the dominant interest in much the same way as scientific racism and neoconservative economics. Now, I'll say that there's a shred of truth there, but you got to separate the wheat from the chaff. You got to separate, you got to be able to pick this apart, because has there been a science of race, a science of eugenics? Yes, there has been. Do I have some sort of, skepticism related to capitalism? Yeah, I do. But I have arguments for it. But I think the way out of it is better science. Science that how do you debunk the science of eugenics other than through a more impartial and objective study of race and then a disclosure of the errors of the previous science? That's how you engage in scientific revolution. That's how you overthrow a previous paradigm as it pertains to scientific inquiry. That's how it happens. And at least the author is willing to admit, yet there are other potentials in science. You can't say that all science is fucked up. It's not gonna work. You can't and you can't just get rid of geometry and basic arithmetic because you got a problem with the people who formed the sciences. You got to prove that what they're saying is untrue. Now, we can be critical of some of their practices, but goddamn, the entire, we supposed to scrap the entire method? Anyway, yet there are other potentials in science. Natural science arose as critique from Copernicus' rejection of the idea that the sun revolved around the earth, to Darwin's rejection of the idea that species were created individually by divine providence. A heady mixture of critique, empirical information, and imagination has been at work in each great scientific revolution. So, the author is conceding the point that there are potentials in science to overthrow error in thought. Okay? It has happened. There are some flat earthers out here. I think they're fucking idiots. If you ask me. Might sound like some fucked up language for me to use, but I think if you believe the earth is flat, you're a fucking idiot. If you believe, and white folks in Europe, up until Copernicus, they really did believe that the earth was the center of the fucking universe. And this is not to say that there weren't people who thought differently in different times, okay? But as it pertains to the dominant opinion in Europe, before or prior to the Enlightenment and Copernicus's work, the earth was the center of the universe and the motherfucker was flat, bruh. Those are the facts. That's what they thought. So Copernicus comes along. I've made a video about it. Go watch it. It's in a playlist called The Philosophy of Science, if you want to see how. I'm not about to get into it. Also, there was this idea that, the species were all created, on their own accord. Even humans. were created, you know, in different geographical locations. So there was a polygenetic theory of human origin. Like white people sprang up in Europe or the Caucasus Mountains and were created separately from Asians and separately from Africans. I say the way to get rid of, you know, bad science or bad hypotheses is to develop better ones and to demonstrate through the method utilized by science that the previous hypotheses were wrong. It's called falsification. That's the methodology. Bruh, this guy saying you can't believe in God and say the earth is flat. Bruh, let me just say this. I'm not going to even engage in scientific inquiry to prove the ridiculousness of this shit. But we got trains, planes, and automobiles and shit right now. I'm pretty sure, like, if you've been on a plane, you can get on a plane and go pretty goddamn far. Why is there no fucking edge to this bitch? Why ain't nobody been to the edge of this motherfucker, man? Why ain't nobody been to the edge of the motherfucker? Why don't we have tourist attractions where motherfuckers can look over the edge of this bitch? Why is every other celestial body close to us? Why is that motherfucker spherical, man? And then why can't we go walk right? Nigga, why can't we walk right to the edge of the fucking earth, man? And look down. I mean, goddamn, man. Common fucking sense, man. Why have we never heard of a motherfucker who fell off the earth? You mean it's 1 billion motherfuckers on the planet and not one motherfucker out of all the billions ever been to the edge of the goddamn earth, man? Not one that's ever existed in the fucking entirety of humanity has ever been to the edge of this bitch. And that don't even have nothing to do with my belief about God. I'm just saying, come on, bro. Like, really? let me not get... Hey, man. Anyway. And Copernicus was a fucking monk. He was a Christian monk. I'm not gonna go, man. I'm done with that, man. I can't go. I can't, man. Anyway, the author says, can we take another step and connect this element of critique with the social critique involved in the analysis of masculinity? Or connect the drive for scientific generalization with the idea of generalizable interest in social life and thus with the concept of justice? Man, that's a hell of a step to make right there, Connell. I can't fuck with foreign and domestic right now. If I see another comment from that motherfucker, I might just lose it. I just can't right now, man. No disrespect to you, man. I can't, man. I can't do it, man. I mean, we got motherfucking satellites in outer space, bro. Like literally, we have fucking, like, we have global positioning satellites, man, that we use our phones with. I'm Rakim right now. I guess somebody told you what little knowledge is dangerous. It can't be mixed, diluted, can't be changed to switch. Anyways, the author is then saying, look, okay, if it's the case that the generalization that is utilized in scientific, because that's what scientific inquiry is. If you would notice, like if you would look back at the introduction to the philosophy of science videos that I've made, you would know that the new Novum Organum means the new tool. That's what it means. And Sir Francis Bacon said the new tool is the tool of induction. Previous thinkers were using deductive logic or using the methodology of geometry in order to make, or philosophy, in order to make generalizations about the nature of reality. But the scientific method is largely, at least in its inception, it's an inductive method where you make generalizations from particulars about the way things are. So that's the whole the whole, constellation of concepts that the author is discussing, right? I mean, we assume that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. Not literally, but figuratively, because we actually know, well, maybe some people don't, but the sun doesn't actually rise as much as the earth rotates in a particular kind of way around the sun. But having said all that, who believes that the sun is not going to rise tomorrow? It could not. But I mean, generally speaking, science extrapolates from particulars to make general assertions about the nature of reality. That's what an inductive argument really is. Now, I don't want to go into the problem of induction because there are philosophical problems with the problem of induction, but I'm not here to do that now. But the point is, to some degree, science is an inductive endeavor. If a certain set of conditions obtain, this is what you'll receive. If you freeze water to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, you get ice. If you heat paper up to 451 degrees, it will burn. Metallic substances expand when heated and contract when cooled. So those are generalizations based upon empirical observation of data. But I'm not going to, the whole point is, the author is saying, because we can be critical of the power relationships or the people who've done bad science before, we can be critical. Because we can be critical about science, we can be critical about the ways that they muse about masculinity, okay? Or connect the drive for scientific generalization with the idea of generalizable interest in social life, and thus with the concept of justice. These proposals are subject to the full weight of postmodern skepticism about grand narratives and economic rationalist skepticism about justice. Now, I have to make an admission here. I am postmodern. I think the moderns have things wrong. I think the moderns were engaged in bad science. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I want to preserve what's useful and what allows us to acquire better information. Now, it's a difference between throwing out the method and, having a critique of the people who are engaged in the method, in what's being done and conducted. We can talk about that, but I'm not willing to throw the method out. That would be foolishness to me. And then what does science in and of itself, which is a different kind of inquiry than social inquiry, it's different. And you would have learned this if we got to the point where we would be going to talk about social science with my series that I was about to do with, basically labeled The Philosophy of Science. I just don't think social science, I think we should do it, but we should know its limitations. It's not going to yield the same kind of results as, say, for example, chemistry and physics. Because human beings are not like fucking inanimate objects. Even though we are material, there's no denying that human beings have a material component. You can't fucking deny it. I'm just waiting for somebody to deny that. With pure spiritual energy and shit, Like, come on, bro. Really? So yeah, Rael, like I agree with you. Like, we can throw the we can throw the bathwater out, but we don't have to throw the baby out. It says much of 18th and 19th century science centered around trying to prove racial superiority of whites, which has been debunked. But how was it debunked? I think it was debunked by science. So yes, people who do science can have ulterior motives, but I think that the method in and of itself doesn't have a motive at all. The method doesn't have a motive. It's just a method. So my proposal to the author would be, well, what's the better method? And then what kind of results are we going to receive from a replaced method? Okay, bro. I told foreign and domestic, man, I'm done, man. I'm not gonna go into there. You got YouTube videos, man, that can demonstrate to you that the earth is rotating, bro. I did a whole video on this shit, man. A whole fucking video, bro. I'm not about to even go into it. Anyway, the author says, I will come back to the critique of masculinity in the final part of the book. Here, I want merely to register the political ambiguities of scientific knowledge. Sciences of masculinity may be emancipatory or they may be controlling. They may even be both at once. So this is important right here. So the author is making a claim. There are political ambiguities of scientific knowledge. Sciences of masculinity may be emancipatory or they may be controlling. They may even be both at once. Now, the only issue I have with this is this person is a feminist social scientist, okay? And I already know that they're critical of masculinity. You already know that they are, okay? But here's the issue. What's going to replace it? Why is control always associated with masculinity and never with femininity? Think women are not controlling? Anybody who's had a fucking girlfriend or a wife knows for a fucking fact that women can be controlling as fuck. Anybody who's had a mama knows that a woman can be controlling as fuck. I just hate assumptions about one particular gender's control, because to me, the scripting is just the same. The scripting is men are active, women are passive. I think baked into the cake of a lot of feminism is passiveness and the inability to actually have any agency. That everything around them happens to them, that they don't make shit happen at all. I find that problematic, man. I find that deeply problematic. That everything that happens to women happens outside of the context of their agency. I just find it absolutely astounding that these kind of assertions are baked into like this political way of thinking. But anyway, in the course of the 20th century, there have been three main projects for a science of masculinity. One was based in the clinical knowledge acquired by therapists, and its leading ideas came from Freudian theory. The second, now this is where we get into the meat of the shit. In the course of the 20th century, there have been three main projects for a science of masculinity. Peep the game now. First, you got Freudian theory. That's the first. Number two, you have a science of masculinity based on social psychology and centered around the enormously popular idea of sex role. Number three involves recent developments in anthropology, history, and sociology. In this chapter, I will examine the character of knowledge about masculinity produced in each of these projects, then turn to the knowledge produced by movements of resistance in gender and sexual politics. So the first thing the author is going to do is look at each of the projects for, establishing a science of masculinity. He's going to look at Freudian theory, the popular idea of sex roles, and third, developments in anthropology, history, and sociology. After that, there's going to be a counter, I won't even say a counter, but a critique of each of these three predicated upon gender and sexual politics. Okay? The mismatches among these projects raise the question of what precisely knowledge about masculinity is knowledge of. I will try to answer this question in the final section of the chapter. Now, I'm going to read the Freudian part, but tomorrow I will come back and read the last two, the science of sex roles and the idea of sexual or biological differences in sex from a historical and anthropological approach and a social scientific approach. Okay? I'm only dealing with Freud right now, and I know we already an hour and 30 minutes into this. Somebody please get rid of this porn shit. God damn. Why me today, man? Okay, so the first sustained attempt to build a scientific account of masculinity was made in the revolutionary depth psychology founded at the turn of the century by Freud. I don't know why she refers to it as depth psychology. I get it, but I would think more of Jung as a proponent of depth psychology as opposed to Freud, but I get it. Anyway, psychoanalysis has had so tangled a development and so vast an impact on modern culture that its origins in medical practice are easily forgotten. And before I even begin this, there's a philosopher by the name of Karl Popper who came out and he basically asserted that, and go look up the name, Karl Popper. Go look it up. Wrote a book called The Logic of Scientific Discovery. And ultimately, you know, what he says is that what Freud is doing is not science. He's not doing science at all. And that's Popper. And I guarantee you, bro, I dare anybody to dispute this. The way science is conducted contemporarily, nobody is doing anything other than utilizing the work of Karl Popper and his methods, for the most part. Falsification is the buzz and catchphrase. It's the methodology in science, whether it be social or the hard sciences. It's all about falsification. Karl Popper's going to say whatever the fuck, like whatever Freud is doing, it is not science at all. So this hurdle has already been overcome. Now, to the author's credit, the extent to which, you know, ideas from Freud still remain as vestiges, there could be some problems. But I mean, I think that Freud, to some degree, there's an element of truth into what Freud says about our minds. But Freud didn't have a scientific method in order to demonstrate it. And some of the, you know, conclusions that he reached were not based upon a sound scientific method. Anyway, psychoanalysis has had so tangled a development and so fast an impact on modern culture that its origins in medical practices are easily forgotten. The founder himself was always clear that psychoanalytic knowledge was based on clinical observation and was tested in a practice of healing. This connection with medicine has linked psychoanalysis throughout its history to efforts at normalization and social control. Yet there have also been radical potentials in psychoanalysis from the start. Freud's early work coincided with a ferment in the European intelligentsia that produced modernist literature, avant-garde painting and music, radical social ideas, spirited feminist and socialist movements, and the first homosexual rights movement. Freud was sufficiently open to this ferment to question, as his clinical practice levered him away from professional orthodoxy, almost everything European culture had taken for granted about gender. This is what makes his work the starting point of modern thought about masculinity, though most later masculinity researchers have known little and cared less about the detail of his ideas. It was Freud, more than anyone else, who let the cat out of the bag. He disrupted the apparently natural object, masculinity, and made an inquiry into its composition, both possible and, in a sense, necessary. So the author's paying homage to Freud, even though there's going to be a critique. Freud nowhere wrote a systematic discussion of masculinity, but it is one of the continuing themes in his writing over 30 years. His ideas developed in 3 steps. The first came in the initial statements of psychoanalytic principles, the idea of continuity between normal and neurotic mental life, the concepts of repression and the unconscious, and the method that allowed unconscious mental processes to be read through dreams, jokes, slips of the tongue, and symptoms. Freud understood that adult sexuality and gender were not fixed by nature, but were constructed through a long and conflict-ridden process. He increasingly saw the Oedipus complex, the emotional tangle of middle childhood involving desire for one parent and hatred for the other, as the key moment in this development. What precipitated the Oedipal crisis for boys was the rivalry with the father and terror of castration. These ideas were documented in two famous case studies, Little Hans and The Rat Man in 1909. Here Freud identified a formative moment in masculinity and pictured the dynamics of a formative relationship. So in other words, there's something being stated here that masculinity has to be developed within a social context, or it's nurtured within a social context. This is what is being presented here. In his theoretical writings, however, Freud had already begun to complicate this picture. Homosexuality, he argued, is not a simple gender switch. A large proportion of male inverts retain the mental quality of masculinity. Confronted with the facts of inversion, Freud offered the hypothesis that humans were constitutionally bisexual, that masculine and feminine currents coexisted in everyone. Peeping now, this implied that adult masculinity had to be a complex and, in some ways, precarious construction. So that's the first step. The second step in Freud's analysis of masculinity was the development of his architectural approach to gender. It was given full play in his longest case history, The Wolf Man, published during the Great War. Here, Freud pushed behind the Oedipus complex to find a pre-Oedipal, narcissistic masculinity, which underpinned castration anxiety. Tracking forward, Freud traced the interplay between this archaic emotion, the boy's desire for the father, his relationships with servants, his identification with women, and jealousy of his mother. Freud used these contradictions to explain the change in the Wolfman's adolescent and early adult life from a shallow heterosexual promiscuity to neurotic apathy. In his most brilliant of case studies, Freud demonstrated the power of the clinical method in separating layer after layer of emotion and mapping the shifting relationships between them. Nothing could be further from the one-dimensional formula still commonly offered as the findings of psychoanalysis. The Wolfman study is a challenge to all later research on masculinity. No approach is adequate that has not absorbed this lesson about the tensions within masculine character and its vicissitudes through the course of a life. In the years after the Great War, Freud developed his account of the structure of personality. In particular, the concept of the superego, the unconscious agency that judges, censors, and presents ideals. This concept was the basis of a third step in analyzing masculinity. The superego is formed in the aftermath of the Oedipus complex by internalized prohibitions from the parents. Freud gradually came to see it as having a gendered character, being crucially a product of the child's relation with the father, and more distinct in the case of boys than of girls. In Civilization and Its Discontents and other writings about culture, he also began to see a sociological dimension in the superego. He treated it as the means by which culture obtains mastery over individual desire, especially aggression. These lines of thought remain speculative and incomplete, but they have profound implications. Here was the germ of a theory of patriarchal organization of culture, transmitted between generations through the construction of masculinity. To develop this theory would be to tilt further towards social analysis than Freud and his orthodox followers were ever willing to do. Radical psychoanalysis, however, moved in just that direction. So Freud opened more doors than he walked through, but the openings he supplied for the analysis of masculinity were remarkable enough. He provided a method of research, psychoanalysis itself, as a guiding concept, the dynamic unconscious, a first map of the development of masculinity, and a warning about the necessary complexity and limits of the idea. The point he most insistently made about masculinity, was that it never exists in a pure state. That's important. Now, this is Freud. Now, again, you would have to, have a thoroughgoing understanding of Freud's theory. Later people's, critiques of it. I personally don't want to get into all that. But, the author here is saying that Freud has, to some extent, demonstrated that masculinity is not something that's natural, that is socially constructed. And that it's, there are competing urges within an individual, okay? So the point I don't want to read that again, but layers of emotion coexist and contradict each other. Each personality is a shade-filled, complex structure, not a transparent unit. Though his theoretical language changed, Freud remained convinced of the empirical complexity of gender and the ways in which femininity is always part of a man's character. It was this critical and disturbing insight that was thrown out with the bathwater when later, more conservative psychoanalysts abandoned the theory of bisexuality. I'm pausing. But come on, man. I've listened to guys talk about the unconscious, the conscious, and I've heard people, through the Memphite theology, people who are hermeticists and things of this nature have conversations about the composition of the spirit or the psyche, and how there are passive and active aspects of it. This is why, in the Memphite theology, there's a constant or an ennead of gods, both male and female. And that, your soul is imbued with each of these aspects. So there's an offset faculty of your spirit. There's an Osiris faculty of your spirit. There's a Heru aspect of your spirit. Right? So it's not, this guy's not Freud also studied, ancient Egyptian shit. So to me, this is not even surprising. Okay. But bisexuality, that's a whole different matter. But especially, I want to know how the author is actually thinking about sexuality or bisexuality. Does a boy in his pre-Oedipal years seek to have sex with his father? Is that what the fucking boy is, a young boy is thinking? What the hell, man? I'm not so sure I buy into all of what Freud has to say. But anyway, the potential in Freud's work for a science of masculinity was apparent very early. It was taken up even before the Great War by Alfred Adler, whose theory of the masculine protest will be discussed shortly. In the 20s and 30s, more orthodox psychoanalysts engaged in a vehement debate about femininity, which spun off a minor debate about masculinity. This focused on the earliest years of childhood. The first contributors were surprised to find clinical evidence of a pre-Oedipal femininity in boys, resulting from identification with the mother, though also marked by jealousy towards her. The argument was given a more feminist turn by Karen Horney in a paper crisply titled The Dread of Woman. For Horney, fear of the mother is more deep-seated and more energetically repressed than fear of the castrating father. The vagina itself is the symbolic center of the process. Boys' feelings of inadequacy lead them to withdraw emotional energy from the mother and focus it on themselves and their genitals, thus preparing the ground for castration anxiety. What? Man, look, I have to tell you at some point what Popper says about like Freudian theory. But anyway, later reactions among men are fueled by these emotions. Among them are the tendency to choose socially inferior women as love objects and the habit of actively undermining women's self-respect in order to support the ever precarious self-respect of the average man. Horney's paper was the high point of the critique of masculinity in classical analysis, psychoanalysis. It crystallized two important points: the extent to which adult masculinity is built on overreactions to femininity, and the connection of the making of masculinity with the subordination of women. But in terms of mainstream psychoanalysis, this was an end, not a beginning. Between the 30s and 60s, and that's of the 1900s, psychoanalysis moved far to the right on most issues, and the theory of gender was no exception. When psychoanalysts such as Theodore Reich became popular writers on gender issues in the 50s, they no longer stressed the contradictory character of gender or the clash between social order and desire. Rather, their message identified mental health with gender orthodoxy, especially conventional heterosexuality and marriage. The course towards adult heterosexuality, which Freud has seen as a complex and fragile construction, was increasingly presented as an unproblematic, natural path of development. Anything else was viewed as a sign of pathology, especially homosexuality. This was declared inherently pathological, the product of disturbed parent-child relationships, as a team of New York psychoanalysts led by Irving Bieber announced in 1962. Psychoanalysis as a practice increasingly became a technique of normalization, attempting to adjust its patients to the gender order. As Kenneth Lew's splendid history of psychoanalytic ideas about male homosexuality shows, this privileging of one healthy path of development required a radical alteration in the concept of the Oedipus complex. To Freud and his early followers, the Oedipus complex was necessarily traumatic, and its passing was necessarily disruptive. That was basic to their sense of the fragility of adult masculinity, founded on the tragic encounter between desire and culture. The non-tragic normalizing psychoanalysis of the 40s and after lost the capacity for a critique of masculinity that classical theory had provided. It took a long detour for that capacity to be recovered. Shout out to Mr. Heat, man. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Again, this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea because a lot of motherfuckers have a lot to say about masculinity and femininity, but it's unfortunate that you got a motherfucking trans woman in the academy that has more, like theoretical understanding about it than the average motherfucker walking on the street that claims that they're masculine. Now, I'm not here to say one way or the other what's true or what's not at the very moment. I mean, I have my viewpoints about this and my ideas. But right now, I just want to, if you want to understand what people in the academy are saying and part of the woke crowd are saying what they're saying, if you want to know why they're saying what they're saying, keep following me down this rabbit hole. Because it's not just some shit that they just threw together. I mean, maybe some woke, blog writers or something. They haven't read this. I guarantee you they have not read Raywin Connell. I guarantee you a lot of academicians have not read it. I guarantee it, bruh. Because a lot of these motherfuckers don't read. They just read secondary literature. This is Connell themselves, not what other motherfuckers had to say about it. Fuck all the secondary literature. I want to dive into what Connell actually has to say. Okay? Anyway, archetype and identity. And I only got like four more pages to read of this and then I'm done. Okay? Clinical experience is so complex that it always allows a range of interpretations. Different interpretations of cases suggest different theoretical frameworks. And the history of psychoanalysis is rich in systems that offer alternative readings of emotional life. Several have produced theories of masculinity, including the best known, the work of Carl Jung. Gender questions were central to the system Jung began to develop after his break with Freud. Jung, distinguishing between the self-constructed in transactions with the social environment, which he called the persona. BGS has spoken about this shit, right? I've heard him make reference to the persona and how the persona is so-called feminine. Anyway, gender questions were central to the system Jung began to develop after his break with Freud. And he distinguished between the self-constructed in transactions with the social environment, which he called the persona, and the self-formed in the unconscious out of repressed elements, which he called the anima. So I don't know which BGS asserted that was feminine or which one was masculine, but I do know that BGS has spoken about the persona and the anima. I wish he was still here, but motherfucker left. Anyway, these, he argued, tend to be opposites, and the opposition is to a large extent a gendered one. The repression of feminine traits and inclinations causes these contrasexual demands to accumulate in the unconscious. Like Freud and Klein, Jung was concerned about the presence of a femininity within men, but his account of it gradually took on a different color, focusing not on the process of repression, but on the resulting balance between a masculine persona and a feminine anima. So the feminine is anima, okay? The anima is feminine, okay? And the masculine persona is the masculine, okay? So, pimp, we got that one backwards. So the persona is the masculine, the feminine is the anima, and the balance, I think Jung is trying to look for a balance between these. Further, Jung was increasingly prone to argue the feminine interior of masculine men was shaped not only by the life history of the particular man, but also by inherited archetypal images of women. The idea of archetypes in the collective unconscious was originally introduced in such arguments to account for paradoxes of emotional life. In time, the archetypes parted company from clinical knowledge. They became the main theme of later Jungian argument about gender. In Jung's hands, ideas such as the anima could be put to subtle use. He developed an interesting theory of the emotional dynamics of patriarchal marriages. He used the idea of a masculine-feminine polarity to call for a gender balance in mental and social life, a progressive position in the 1920s. He even devised a kind of masculinity therapy, arguing that a certain type of modern man, accustomed to repress weakness, could no longer afford to do so. In a striking passage, foreshadowing techniques of therapy that became popular 50 years later, Jung suggested methods for talking to one's anima, as if to a separate personality, and educating it. But in other ways, Jung's analysis became schematic and speculative in the extreme. While Freud was struggling to overcome the masculine-feminine polarity, Jung not only settled for it, but presented the familiar opposition as rooted in timeless truths about the human psyche. In the absence of the discipline of clinical case studies, archetypes are fatally easy to find. Jung's later books found them in esoteric arts and world religions, and his followers have scoured other mythological systems. This results in deeply confused texts such as Marshall Bethal's The Mythic Male, an erratic hunt through Greco-Roman myths taken utterly out of context for male gods who might personify modes of masculine consciousness. Now this is something right here that I'm interested in exploring further. I'll say that. But I don't know what, the author, I don't know what Kano has read. I don't know, I don't know how deep down the rabbit hole Kano is going into this subject matter here, but this is interesting to me. Anyway, Iron John is a Jungian work in exactly this vein, except that Robert Bly finds his archetypes in a folk tale recast by the Brothers Grimm rather than more conventionally in the pages of Ovid. Bly too ignores the cultural origins of this tale and scrambles its interpretations with notions of Zeus's energy and even wilder borrowings from oral cultures. Jung's treatment of the masculine-feminine polarity as a universal structure of the psyche also leads to a quagmire. No historical change in their constitution is conceivable. All that can happen is a change in the balance between them. In modern Jungian writing, this yields an interpretation of feminism not as resistance to the oppression of women, but as the reassertion of the archetypal feminine. In past history, it is not men who have dominated women so much as the masculine that has dominated the feminine. And look, let me just say this shit. There are going to be a lot of people, whether you like it or not, or whether you understand it or not, that's why a lot of men are saying, women are masculine now. The extent to which they have really actually accepted and adopted masculine norms. But I mean, this will be, I guarantee you it'll be discussed. Because you got to think about it. In a contemporary context, especially in the space, a space like this, a lot of dudes are placing their masculinity and their ability to make money in the marketplace. So how do you know you're a man or the man? I'm a man because I'm rich. I'm a man because I'm successful. I'm a man in the extent to which I can pay the bills. I got a good job. I, occupy a top position. So I call it marketplace masculinity. Really, that's what that shit is. Marketplace masculinity. But how do you reconcile marketplace masculinity and women who are calling for men to have these kind of things with women's entry into the market and demanding that they make just as much money as men? How do you reconcile those two? How? But I'm digressing. Anyway, one can see why Jungian theory has become central to the current backlash among formerly progressive men. So this approach immediately yields the idea that modern feminism is tilting the balance too far the other way and suppressing the masculine. My personal opinion is that this is not what's happening at all. In my viewpoint, women are lionizing the masculine so much because they associate all of the materiality in the world going to men that they want a piece of it. It's almost as if men occupy positions in the world that women perceive as better than the ones they have. And so they want a piece of what men have. I mean, I'm speaking in terms of Western culture. So it's no surprise that, like a lot of men are saying these women are masculine. Like even, T.D. Jakes is beginning to discuss this shit. Like, now, whether or not masculinity is connected to earning money, personally, I don't think my viewpoint is that it doesn't. Only to the extent to which you can give it to somebody else. I mean, being productive is part of being a man. I mean, part of, having social utility and utility to yourself and the people that you're surrounded by is part of being a man, or is part of masculinity. But I mean, going to work at motherfucking A.G. Edwards or some shit, that by default does not have anything to do with masculinity to me. But a lot of people perceive it as that. But I'm digressing. This is an entry point into a lot of conversations with terms that can be utilized in order to, keep us on track instead of motherfuckers just saying random shit about masculinity. But anyway, but this approach immediately yields the idea that modern feminism is tilting the balance too far the other way and suppressing the masculine. Bly's influential criticism of soft men. There you go. Now tell me you ain't never used the word. That's a soft ass nigga. You're a liar. You're a liar. Soft ass nigga. You're a liar if you say you ain't never used it. Anyway, Bly's influential criticism of soft men who have caved into feminism and thus have lost the deep masculine is based precisely on this Jungian formula of archetypal balance. So you can see right here, the author is critical of Jung's concept of archetypal balance. You can see that. Anyway, since Jung's original texts are now little studied, the roots of this argument in the early history of psychoanalysis are forgotten. It is worth recalling what has been lost. Jung based his analysis of gender on an abstract opposition of masculinity and femininity, which Freud was gradually working his way past. Jung's formulations lost most of the complexity in Freud's map of psychosexual development. And by seeking the main determinant of gender in racial unconscious, the supposed repository of archetypes, Jung turning his back on the path towards a socially literate psychoanalysis that was pointed out by Adler and Horney. Now, this is really important for you to understand because what the author has done is introduce raciality into these psychoanalytic concepts. Now, let's just be let's just be honest here, man. Like the id for Freud is niggas. Real talk. The primal instincts unchecked by the superego is the African consciousness, man. I mean, like, if you want to know what the truth is, that's the fucking truth, bro. He's a fucking racist. And that's a good point, Rael. Because but we can have a discussion about that at some point. But right now, I'm just reading the first part of chapter 1. Tomorrow, I'll read the second part of chapter 1. And I think it's worth going through the first 3 chapters of this book. That's it. I'm not going no further than that. But I think it's worth going through the first 3 chapters of this book. If you want to, instead of fucking guessing, if you want to know what these people are thinking, like if you hear the term hegemonic masculinity and shit like that, this is the person who created the concept. So if you want to know what it is, instead of fucking thinking about it and acting like you know what the fuck it is when you really don't know what the fuck it is, keep listening to your boy. But anyway, in recent popular psychologies of masculinity, the main alternative to the idea of gender archetypes has been the concept of gender identity. This stems from the work of Erik Erikson, perhaps the most influential psychoanalyst of the generation after Freud and Jung. In Childhood and Society, Erikson argued that the crucial issues in emotional development in the mid-20th century had to do with the establishment of ego identity. Identity became a catchword, and Erikson's model of stages in its development became immensely popular. The main application of identity concepts to gender came from the American psychiatrist Robert Stoller. Stoller's work centered on a remarkable development in gender practice, the invention of the transsexual. The creation of surgical techniques for gender reassignment created a need to assess who should go under the knife, and this led to research on claims of gender membership. Stoller made clinical studies of adult men who wanted to be women and boys who seemed to be on a path towards femininity, a path he called male childhood transsexualism, a clear-cut, potentially malignant personality disorder. Oh, man. This research did not lead him towards the classical Freudian view of gender as a contradictory structure. Rather, he considered he had discovered a unitary core gender identity laid down in the earliest years of life. Gender identity is established by emotional interaction between parents and children. Stoller has some harsh things to say about mothers and is powerful enough to override the physical facts about the body. Transsexualism for men is thus defined not as the desire to be a woman, but as the belief that one already is. In the normal case, now I don't know who's speaking and who she's speaking about here. I'm confused. Anyway, I don't know if this is the declaration or if she's still referring to Stoller. But anyway, transsexualism for men is thus defined not as the desire to be a woman, but as the belief that one already is. In the normal case, of course, a boy acquires a male gender identity and all is well. Gender identity theory has had wide circulation as an account of gender development. It has influenced recent psychoanalytic writing on child development and on homosexuality, as well as anthropological discussions of masculinity. Though built on the lurid contradictions of transsexuals' lives, this is unquestionably a normalizing theory. It locates identification with women, not in the unconscious of all men, but in a specific deviant group. It is not surprising that men wanting sex reassignment surgery take great care, as the sociologist Anne Boleyn has shown, to conform to the doctor's beliefs about feminine dress and conduct. In a biting critique, Robert May has questioned whether this is a psychoanalytic theory at all. May argues that Erikson's approach is really ameliorist ego psychology, and that Stoller's concept of core gender identity has lost essential psychoanalytic insights about conflict, fantasy, and the unconscious. It is hard to disagree. Now, you should tell us more about Erik Erikson. You got to tell us more. You got to tell us more about Stoller than to just pass over and just reject what they say. It's worth investigating. Anyway, if Jung reduced the contradictions of gender to a universal dichotomy within the psyche, gender identity theory has gone one better, eliminating contradiction altogether. So it's apparent to me, it is apparent to me that Connell thinks that gender identity is in conflict within each person. Like she assumes or asserts that Freud asserted. She doesn't like Jung because Jung argues that there are two archetypes that have to exist in balance. And if there's off balance, then there's dysfunction. Whereas with Erikson and Stoller, the idea of gender identity is introduced, and if a boy who's born, if someone is born as a male, it is dysfunction to Stoller for that individual to identify as the opposite sex. So you can see here, as it pertains to the psychoanalytic theorizing about masculinity, that this author has a preference for Freud, and the idea that these competing masculinity, femininity constructs in the unconscious, that's the way to go for this author. Okay, that's what I'm reading from these passages. Okay, doesn't like Jung, doesn't like Erikson, doesn't like Stoller, but likes the approach that the early Freud developed in relation to this idea that like it's an emotive process and a topsy-turvy one filled with conflict related to the development of a gender identity. So this is where we are, okay? Anyway, thus over the half century that followed the Wolfman case study, Freudian psychoanalysis and the two most influential alternatives to it developed conservative gender practices and normalizing theories of masculinity. Theories that identified psychological health with a narrow orthodoxy in sexuality and emotion. But this was not the only direction Freud's ideas could have been taken. Around the edges of the medical world, dissent, versions, and unexpected applications of psychoanalysis multiplied. A number of them produced original ideas about gender. And I think this is where I'm going to stop, because it can get a little bit tedious just reading shit. And I don't want to get stuck to the point where, like, if you read too much too long, then you kind of, you don't retain what you're reading anyway. Okay? So just know that I have finished damn near at least a third of the first chapter. We got to get through. This is the longest chapter in this book. Okay, the chapter is some, I think, 50 pages. But if you're willing to ride through it, I'll push through it. Yeah, it's well, actually, it's not even 50 pages. It's 44 pages. So I'm damn, what am I, page 15 right now? So I'll break this up into thirds. I wanted to get through all of that, but I don't want to push through it because I'm getting tired of reading this shit. Real talk. So what I'll do is tomorrow I'll come back and read from page, I guess it's 15, huh? Or is it 14? Yeah, from 15 to like 20, 25 or something like that. And then maybe even get to 30 if we can. And then from there, just finish the chapter out. And then I'll take a break from this for like 3 or 4 days and then come back to it with the second chapter. But I think there's some value in looking at it, because basically the author's saying is 3 different ways that masculinity has become defined in the Western world. First, you got psychoanalysis, okay? Then you have the common idea of sex roles, and then you got history and anthropology, which offers, another aspect of what femininity and masculinity are based upon, those thinkers and those disciplines. And I haven't heard any motherfuckers in this space talking about this kind of shit at all. Now, you can say what you want about the implications of what it is that they're saying, but I don't think it's inaccurate in relation to, how the concepts of masculinity actually evolved in the domain of science, so to speak, or in the academy, so to speak. And before I move any further, if there's anybody that wants to say something, they can. I'll give you the opportunity, if you want to. Yeah, I'm getting spammed up, man. Somebody, for some reason, I don't know, man. Here and there, I get spammed and shit like that. But, shout out to Blaze Skywalker. Appreciate the donation. And I don't know if I missed anybody, but, whoever I did miss, I just want to say thank you. Kareem Austin, I think I missed him. Appreciate your donation, sir. Drew Main, appreciate your donation, sir. Appreciate that. Travis T says, keep putting the info out. It is truly needed. At least the work is out and can be viewed by anyone at that time. That's why I'm doing it. That's why I'm doing this. So, you can always refer back to it if you desire. If you don't want to see it, fine with me. But I feel like it's necessary we keep talking about masculinity, and we keep talking about, how other people think about it, but we really don't know their position and how they came to the position that they hold. And I'm pretty sure that most of these people who are articulating these things haven't read this shit either. I guarantee you they haven't read it. Shout out to Brotherly Love. Thank him. I want to hit him and give him a shout out. Thanks. And Aaron Peters as well. Thank y'all for supporting me. Appreciate that. But this ain't like, me continuously going off on women or whatever the case may be. It's just me looking at these ideas. So it ain't going to be everybody's cup of tea. But I want to get through the first chapter at least and then take a break from it. So if you want to say something, now's your time. If you ain't got nothing to say, I'm out this bitch. I'll do a quick commercial break. If don't nobody come in, I'm out. All right, I'm back. I'm about to close the screen out. About to remove that. And I'm going to add Marcus Aurelius to the stream. What's cracking, my boy?
Hold on, let me get these headphones on, baby. Headphones. Where's the headphones at? What's going on, chat? What's going on, people? Let me put this shit on mute because these headphones is under shit and it's going to make noise. Hold on.
I want to, before I leave, or before we get to conversing, I want to give a shout out to Darren, Rasheed Barnes, and Robert Washington, who hit me up on the Cash App. Appreciate your contribution, fellas. Appreciate that. And if you, think that there's some information here that was important that you received, you can kindly support the channel.
Was good, nigga.
Like it's one thing to argue for or against something. It's another thing to delve into what it is that you're arguing about. So that's why I'm doing this. But yeah, holler at me, Mark.
What's going on, peoples? Popping. Amiri Brown can suck a dick first of all. I'm sorry. I had to say that. I'm sorry. Moving right along. How you doing, sir? Been listening to this shit the whole time. All right. You're saying some wonderful things.
Yeah, man. I know
I came with too much, man. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, you did come with a little bit, man. Like, god damn, kid.
Fuck that nigga.
But I just my viewpoint on it is, man, why even have a conversation about a motherfucker that ain't there? Like, I don't personally.
Oh, that ain't a conversation. That's
no. Well, yeah, it is. It's an emphatic statement, But
expressed.
My view is that I'm not gonna keep going back and forth with motherfuckers through various videos and shit. Like, I'm arguing with a motherfucker video per video per video. You do a video.
Sorry, I'm still not sure about that.
I'm sorry about that, man. Go ahead. Continue.
You do a video, I do a video. You try to tell me or demonstrate that I'm incorrect in my view. My only view has always been that black men have some legitimate shit to say and that we suffer in the world. And black women also suffer in the world. But to place all of the blame at the feet of black men based upon mimetic theory that basically says that we're powerless men, so we beat up and abuse women, that's some bullshit. There's no factual evidence to demonstrate that shit has any fucking connection to reality.
Well, I just want to point this out. I tagged you in something on my community tab earlier. That exposes him as understanding where we come from. I mean, he called black women white supremacist proxies. That's what he said. I got the receipts, baby. And I sent it to you. I tagged you in it because you're not aware of who this guy is. I'm very aware. And this guy's a flip-flopper. Anything that you say to him, he already knows, bro. He already knows. And he'll get on with you or BGS or anyone else in the red pill space and defend the strags, and then when in strag territory, call them everything we call them. I just want you to understand that's who you're dealing with, fam.
But let me just say this: like,
you're my guy.
If I was to be charitable to him, this is what I would articulate. I would say that both black men and black women have the capacity to exhibit white aspirationalism. Like, I mean, I'm not saying, like, if you say, okay, well, you know, black women, they just, you know, they're triangulating white supremacy. I say, to some degree, like a certain segment or class of black women, they do that shit. Yes. But then on the other hand, I can also say it's some black men who do that shit.
No, absolutely. But
like,
again,
you got a group of black men in this space who, for better or for worse, identify with the white value system that derides and caricaturizes black men who don't have the educational level that they have or have the kind of class, positions that they have. It happens.
Understand, you know? I'm going to read something verbatim. Black women are the most violent female group. That's not hyperbole. This is Amiri Brown. Black women, do y'all want to be damsels in distress or Sasha Fierce? Make a decision. You can't have it both ways. Black men ain't shit till you need help. Amiri Brown. Sisters don't want to acknowledge how they've destroyed the morale of their men. Little white supremacist proxies. Amiri Brown. Black women have done such a shitty job raising their sons for the last few decades. Now they want to go marry other group sons. White women are obviously better mothers than y'all asses. Amiri Brown. This is the guy that got on the live with you talking about he's trying to save the community. I told you this guy was full of shit. Understand, this is who you're dealing with. This is who you're talking to.
But let's not make this about this dude. Man.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Because I don't want to make this an invective of that guy. Like I said before, man, I'm tired of talking to motherfuckers in general who consistently have, you know, shit to say about how wrong I am and how right they are. Look, all I've ever said was that we got a one-sided viewpoint. And the one-sided viewpoint is that black men are desiring to be X, Y, and Z. And I'm not saying that some black men don't, you know, exhibit qualities in a white patriarchal culture, right? They don't exhibit qualities to where they're fucking like pathologically constituted intellectually or psychologically. That would be stupid to say.
Understand this, sir. You are the G with the PhD. He is the lame that has been sentenced back to which he came. This man wants to feel and be perceived and speak as an academic. He wants to be accepted, understood, and you know, he wants to be heard with all his word salad ideas as one of you guys. This is what he aspires to be. And he flounders at it terribly. And we all see this. So understand, I want you to understand that you, as somebody, like you said in the top of this video, you studied this stuff. You can go backwards and forth with it in the dark. In the dark, you can do this. You understand what I'm saying? No reference material in front of you, nothing, just off top. You can freestyle this type of stuff. Understand, when you guys were going back and forth with this guy, he had to flip pages. You understand what I'm saying? So don't even stress it. I get it.
I don't even like. Let's dead that shit. Like, you
know.
So
let me address. Let me address what you've been saying tonight. So, you know, it's bugged out to me that, you know, it's almost like, first of all, you know, masculinity for some reason gets more examination than anything else, you know, when it comes to, like, you know, gender shit. You understand what I'm saying? And it seems to be examined by everybody else but men, and then you get white men that examine black masculinity. If it's you don't only have white men evaluating and assessing black masculinity, but you get black male and female social scientists, feminists, right?
You know, conservatives, I mean, all different types, heterosexuals, gays, trans persons, everybody is able to pigeonhole us into a category of depravity and ontological inferiority, or if not inferiority, some sort of, essential category that is savage and brutish.
Well, yeah, but black masculinity is a pathology according to the world. Everyone has, well, I'd say white men. White men have been successful at painting black masculinity a certain way. You understand what I'm saying?
Indeed.
Yeah, it's just interesting, like who writes on this stuff. It's especially heterosexual masculinity. Heterosexual masculinity, in particular, heterosexual black masculinity is always an issue.
For sure. Now hold on for a second. I'm about to something's getting stuck on my OBS, so I'm gonna quit it and come right back. Hold on.
No problem.
Yeah, you can still hear me, can't you?
We can still hear you. We
cool.
Still here.
Yeah, so some real shady shit going on with OBS right now.
OBS be killing me over here also, man. You did the sound check at the beginning, man. I end up having to do that a lot, man. Jumping on and asking guys, can they hear me? Now
look, the audio shit working now. I've been trying to get that motherfucker to work for a month of Sundays. Now this motherfucker want to work. But that's here's the deal. So the claim that the author is making is that implicit within the entire concept of masculinity established by white men is an attendant and a correlative delineation, definition, and an adumbration of femininity, even if it's not implicitly stated. Okay, So I mean, you see here that the author was talking about Stoller. Okay, so the first person she mentioned was Erik Erikson. Okay, and then after that, they made mention to Robert Stoller. So for the author, Erik Erikson picked up where Jung left off, but introduced this whole concept of a identity, a sexual identity. We talk about sexual identity now, like it is what it is, But it's interesting, and this motherfucker, you can say what you want about like their political viewpoints, but I mean, do they get the history wrong? That's what I'm most interested in. And if they don't get it wrong, maybe they interpret it in a political way that works to their benefit. But either somebody came up with a concept that they didn't, and it's important for me to say, okay, well, let's at least examine the source of these concepts and these ideas in Western culture. To determine whether or not we've, absorbed. There's no way not to absorb them as members of this culture. You understand what I'm saying? Now the question is, and this has always been my main question. To me, sex is about reproduction.
At its core, yeah.
Whether we like it or not, we can defy it if we desire. We can, say, okay, well, I'm not going to abide by the norms of my sex. I'm more happy with having sex with somebody of my same sex. And now you got motherfuckers like, okay, well, I hate my own sex so much and don't identify with it to such an extent that now I want to cut my penis off, my outie off.
Right.
And have somebody draft me an innie. And I'm like, whoa, pump the brakes, man. That's why I did the show. I don't know if you had the opportunity to see it, but I said my issues with white trans women.
I seen the thumb. Go ahead. I'm listening.
And the first thing I said is, look, we don't have any control over what happens to us when we're fucking 6 and 7 years old, man. Like, you're not a rational adult. You really can't think through any emotional problems you're having. So you got to charge that to the game. It just is what it is. You're born into the world. You're thrown into it. Okay?
Right.
And you're not responsible for the upbringing you have. Now, when you become like a prepubescent, you start to learn more. You start to see more. Your cognitive mind begins to develop. You begin to assess things, what's right, what's wrong. You might have some hang-ups from your childhood. But, I mean, goddamn, by 16, 17, it's time for you to work that shit out and go and move into the world and become a man or a woman of your own. Okay? And there's nothing we can do about it. We don't have any control over what family life we had when we were 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. We just have no control over that. Okay? We don't have any control over the kind of body we're born with.
No.
But you do have control over what you identify with socially. Now, it seems to me what this trans person is trying to do is say, hey, look, there was alternative routes that could have been taken in dealing with like gender complexity and conflict, and we chose to go in the direction of Erik Erikson and Robert Stoller, who said, hey, look, there's some malignant personality disorders in some of these motherfuckers here. Like if you are, you want to be women and you're an adult man, and if you're a boy who seems to be steered on a path towards femininity, you have a clear-cut malignant personality disorder.
See, there's the thing. These things are trending towards certain places in the country. Like, I was watching Bill Maher, and he said, if this is, and it's something that I said a while ago. I said, I think that this is like a phenomenon. If something that if we're gonna sit and say, that this trans thing is an anomaly, right? Because the norm is heterosexuality. I mean, Freud and all of them motherfuckers, they can say what they want. The norm is heterosexuality because heterosexuality is necessary for us to be here in the first place. So that's the norm. That's where we begin. I mean, all of this talk about, I don't know if he meant, masculinity being socialized into boys on the, under the social context of masculinity, or just basic biological, I don't want to say manhood because that's kind of like a contextual word. But at the end of the day, heterosexuality is wired, right? Sexuality is wired. All this, we're born bisexual. No, sexuality is wired. If we didn't have heterosexuality, we wouldn't be here. The shit wouldn't function. Biologically, the purpose of us being here, like you said, sex is to reproduce. There's only one type of sex that reproduces, and that's heterosexual sex. That is the
I'm just telling you, I'm partial to your view.
Right.
I'm partial to your view. Now, and I've said this to people, academicians, and I'm like, look, if the preponderance of proclivities don't steer in the direction to what's normal, then we have a fucking problem.
So I want to get to the point, though. This is the point. I feel like in humanity and everything. I mean, when you make cars, if you make 1 million cars, you might get maybe 10,000 that's defective. You're gonna have, anomalies. We got billions of people on planet Earth. You're gonna have people with more than or less than 10 fingers. You're gonna have people that have mental deficiencies. You're gonna have all these types of different things that stray from the norm. You're going to have people whose sexual preferences are not the norm, quote unquote, heterosexual reproductive orientation. You're going to have those, right? This is normal. This has been around. What I've argued is that lately there is a sharp rise. Okay, very sharp as a knife in the frequency of, you know, boys who want to be girls. Now they might say, well, you know, it's because it's allowed now. No, well, hold on. Gay motherfuckers been here since Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, gay motherfuckers been here since Sodom and Gomorrah. No matter how bad it was for them to exist, they've been here. They've been here since Alexander the Great and the Greeks and all of that shit. There is a sharp rise in the interest of boys not to be boys. And these things happen more so in liberal spaces than not.
I mean, I'll agree.
I mean, yeah. It's, you know, whether you want to talk about California's or, you know, this cities or that cities, once you leave here, you don't see that much of that shit, right? So, I believe to an extent, right? Because again, sharp rise. I believe to an extent what we're seeing is a social trend. This is a social trend. It's trendy. That's why a lot of these motherfuckers, after they go and get the clip like you're talking about, they kill themselves.
Not the clip, man. Not the clip. Bro.
The clip. They go get the clip, baby. Clip. Shank.
Oh, come on, man.
For those who missed the live a few days ago, shank. They go get the shank, right? So they go get the clip. They go get that, and then it's like, what the fuck did I do? You can read about this. This is what the fuck did I do? You can read about this. They regret it, and then they kill themselves. A lot of people. And I'm gonna make this short. I'm gonna end it off because I know you want to say something. A lot of people like to make the transgender suicide thing about them not being accepted. That may be part of it, but a lot of them have that penis remorse, man. What the fuck did I do? Because you ain't getting it back, motherfucker.
That's gonna be expected, bro. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, all I wanted to do, and I do think that there is the promotion, and I think the promotion comes out of the civil rights movement and discrimination legislation. All it is, for the most part, has been opened up from the women's liberation movement. And the unfortunate thing is, and this is what like a person like Curry is trying to point out, like it's not that, you know, I'm hateful of or like that I have some deep-seated spite for trans persons. It's not it. The point is that the material conditions for my population have still not been addressed. And now we're talking about motherfucking men are not really men and women aren't really women. Like, I mean, you know, like it seems clear to me that you can identify, like you said before, you can identify with whatever, man. I mean, you know, Sodom and Gomorrah, motherfucking ancient Greece, ancient Persia, whatever the case may be. You got lady boys in fucking Vietnam or whatever the case may be. It is what it is. You know, to me, it doesn't matter because, you know, I'm gonna do what I'm one of the normal guys. I want a fat ass and some big tits. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the other guy wants a fat ass and big tits too.
But I don't want. I want the real thing. I want the real McCoy.
No, you want to have them. He wants to have them. You understand what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I get it. But like, you know, and then all I've said was, all I've ever said was, you know, the material conditions of black folks as a whole still have not been addressed. Now we talking about all of these progressive liberal politics, this woke politics shit. Like, this motherfucker who wrote this book, no disrespect, but goddamn, that motherfucker, you know, you born wealthy, man, you know, or middle class or upper middle class. You a fucking professor in Australian university. I'm like, why are we talking about like all the shit you gotta do? Like participating in women's sports and shit. Like, why is that of any import to a person like me or from a person who really didn't have to struggle with none of that? You ain't struggling with like the police coming to knock y'all upside the head. Not now. Not in the same numbers as us. You ain't got the kind of issues we got. But now your issues are of paramount importance more so than anybody else's. And then, not only that, we get typecast as a problem, as the source of all the issues. And in the white imaginary, black men are the worst kind of men. We exhibit the worst and most pathological kind of masculinity. And this is why it's so dangerous for, you know, people to say that, you know, we want to be white men, precisely because when throughout the history of mankind, man, have you ever seen any group of men, man, stigmatized and quoted as being aspirational to their oppressors, man, like us? I've not seen this kind of language. I've never seen it. See, like, that's like saying, you know, that like the Jews really wanted to be Nazis. And like Curry said, or that the men in Viet Cong wanted to be like, you know, the U.S. soldiers who came in and ran into their shit. Or like the Palestinians want to be like the Jews.
But let me speak to that. And this is the thing that kills me. Whether whether it's a simp motherfucker or it's these strags that say that. You want patriarchy because you want the results of it. Like, you want the positive results of the patriarchy. That's what you want. Like, let's all bullshit aside. So when you say y'all motherfuckers is conquered and you're powerless and this and that, what you're saying is you wish we were the opposite of the shit that you're shaming us for being. So when you say that, oh, y'all motherfuckers powerless, you want us to have power. You want us to furnish you with the you know, with the accoutrements, motherfucker, of patriarchy. Right? You want us to be patriarchal in the sense that you benefit from it.
Of course.
Okay, so let me throw this in. So you can't at the same fucking time shame us for aspiring to do so and then say that we are aspiring to be the people who furnish their women with the accoutrements of the patriarchy, right? We're aspiring to be those men and shame us for that. So what the fuck do you really want? Either you want us to, you know, become, you know, powerful or sovereign or whatever it is that you're asking for, patriarchal, right? You want the benefits of the thing that you're shaming us for not being, then tell us, oh, y'all trying to be that. And the reason why a lot of them say that is, oh, you want to be white men, is because we're demanding in return your role in the motherfucking shit you're asking for. You can't ask for some shit and then don't play your fucking part in the shit. That's when you say, oh, you trying to be like them, because we're turning around and saying, well, you know, if we're going to furnish you with these fucking accoutrements, then, well, at the same time, smile, be feminine, this, that, and the other. Like, you know, act like a fucking woman, right?
But at the end of the day, Marcus, man, like, you know, like I grow tired of these conversations, and I'm gonna tell you why. Oh, like exactly what you said. Like, look, at the end of the day, man, you asking for something you getting yourself in the way of to begin with. And not only that, don't shame me, man. You already know what kind of culture we live in and how the culture has done as much as it can to try to, you know, emasculate us. You already know that. So for those of us who want to be men and good men, this society is trying to prevent us from doing so. I think that, like, you can look at the historical record and see that that's actually the case. I mean, by the way they talk about us, the way they essentialize us, the way they stereotype us, the way they beat us in the street, the way they underemploy us, the way they marginalize us, the way they incarcerate us. Clearly, these are systems and institutions put in place to keep us where we're supposed to be, subordinate.
Absolutely, but this is the thing, right?
But wait a minute, though.
Go ahead.
Like, because I don't want this conversation to extend too much because Dr. Hassan is on now, and I want to get to his shit.
I got you. Absolutely.
So, like, women are just as responsible for the so-called toxic masculinity that they say exists out here as are men. And then not only that, like, I just don't believe that the world is made up in polar opposites. So where men do this, women do that, men act like this, women act like that. Personally, like, you can be a little like a rough around the edges if you're a bitch to some extent, but you can't be disrespectful and slapping and punching motherfuckers and acting hard and shit and then say, well, I'm a woman. You can't do nothing to me. Bitch, who the fuck are you?
Oh,
you don't get to go around checking motherfuckers and acting an ass and then expect to get your ass, like treated like a queen.
Well, yeah, they can.
No, but no, actually they can only because like motherfuckers is allowing this shit. Like I was watching The Angry Man the other day, man. It's like niggas is allowing this shit.
Right.
Like it's Negroes are allowing this. And not only are they allowing it, but white women are making an apology for it. Black upper class women are making an apology for this shit. In the academy, people are making apologies for this. And then they're talking about violence as if like black men are the only motherfuckers violent in the black community. And it's like, this is why somebody like Tommy Curry is saying, look, something unique has happened related to the black intelligentsia after the civil rights movement. At first, we were having conversations about structures, institutions. Yeah, we were talking about inclusion, but not just based upon these bifurcated identities. Now, it's all about like my identity group, and it's like I want my interest of my group served. And white women have ushered in the way for this shit to occur. They're the authors of this discourse.
Mm-hmm.
And so my whole thing is, look here, lady. If you like Humpty said back in the day, on I forget the name of the song, but it was like, if you kiss me, then I'll kiss you back.
Mm-hmm. I know the next line. Go ahead, say
but
it.
If you hit me, I will hit you back.
Hit me,
like you don't get to
go.
And like I just don't understand. Like we have to continue to buy in. The only way any of this shit works from feminism to a certain extent is for them to distance themselves from the history of colonialism, slavery, segregation, lynching, because they were part of the project, which was ultimately violent and horrific for people like us. But they get to distance themselves from it and act as if they're victims. And then everybody gets to buy into this passiveness of white women. Like the white womanhood is a terrible thing. Because people get to live through it and act like they're actually at a disadvantage when they're the most populous group in the fucking goddamn country and they're the second wealthiest group. These bitches ain't hurting for nothing. But they claim they're fucking victims, but they were introduced into the mix for shit that was actually marked off for black folks, but it was done as a way to continue to keep the white supremacist logic, the white supremacist power structure in place. These people are not stupid. They're not just going to give this shit up. They're not just going to allow what they consider to be competition to come to the fore. So the question, though, is why are all the black intellectuals bought into this? Why do they also have such a deep-seated interest in identity politics and left progressivism?
Because it's lucrative, man. Understand, man. Me and you, one of our very first conversations, we talked about what was it? The prisoner's dilemma, was it?
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with, man. We're dealing with, people who they know what to say out loud. They know how to virtue signal. They know what comes with, if you say this or if you say that. They I mean, a lot of this like science we talk about, understand, like whether we want to talk about Freud, this or this person, that, what we want to talk about, because I ain't gonna say his name, but like a lot of guys, they throw up philosophers sometimes as scientists, right? So even when you talk about Locke was a philosopher, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not necessarily a scientist, he's a philosopher. And philosopher is a point of view, it's an opinion. Understand that a lot of the stuff that we read from these guys that we know about, a lot of these guys were funded. These guys are no different than the guys today that are saying this and that and, have to side with an agenda versus saying what's true so that we can progress, right? So you got guys like that today. You had guys like that then, where you, as whoever you are, if you're someone who the public respects your opinion on things, people will fund you. They will put things behind you. Will be sponsored. You will be given, benefits to speak, to basically say, hey, look, this, I believe in this. This is what's real. This is what's factual. This is what's true. Yada yada yada. You understand what I'm saying?
You got it's called patronage, bro. I get it, man.
Absolutely. So what I'm saying is, when because once years and years and years go by, we kind of lionize these people from the past, and we forget that even in their era, like this type of stuff was going on. So what, they are who they are. Their ideas can get thrown away also. It's like what you said earlier. You said, you ain't feeling everything Freud said, and you can feel that way because he's a person, and in his time, sometimes he's on point, sometimes he wasn't, or we don't know who laced his pockets to say what, right? So all of these things, man, when you look at it that way, it's like, okay, well, if it ain't making sense, it ain't making sense. This appeal to authority argument is what a lot of people do, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah. But
right.
But let me just say this: the only reason I even make reference to some of these people to begin with is to have guideposts. Like it's like being in the sea.
Right.
Like I want a buoy or something, or a lighthouse here and there to fucking cling to, so we can at least talk about the issues intelligently, and have it, at least a structured conversation. Because like today, like for example, I'm aware that there's philosophy and then there's science, okay? And I believe the philosophy should be tempered by science. I've already mentioned this on so many different occasions.
Yeah, definitely.
But like, it's unconscionable, man, that a motherfucker is alive in the 21st century, man, who thinks that the earth is flat. It's unconscionable to me, man.
I know people like that, man. Oh,
it's like,
man.
I understand, like, the urge to be skeptical. I get it. Or like, at one time, I was deeply religious, man, to the point, like, I was walking around with the Bible, motherfucker. Like, I could have been a preacher or something. But I'm like, hey, come on, man. Like, your belief in God does not have to be predicated upon the idea that the earth is flat.
They're connecting Bronze Age ideologies together. So, you understand? So this is the thing. Science challenges God. So, the fact that the earth is round is science. So round earth challenges God. And that's where, like what old boy said earlier, oh, you can't believe in God and believe that the earth is round. Why? Because round earth is a scientific discovery as opposed to flat earth being something from the Bronze Age. And they're what they're basically saying is we need to go back to the beliefs before science. Discard science because science challenges anything that challenges God, right? We can't accept it while being on your electronic device, on a radio signal, typing, right? On the internet, right? While hearing someone speak that's not in the room with you, they're in another state across the country or somewhere else where you can't physically see them in line of sight. Like, all of those things imply science, but you believe that science is bad and it defies God, so you don't believe in it. Right.
Well, like at the end of the day, I've always said, look, you got analytic statements and then you have matter-of-fact statements. Now, we can muse and philosophize all day. I don't have a problem with ideas, but God damn it, at the end of the day, man, we need to study black folks, man, more scientifically than we need to do with all these fucking ideas coming out of philosophy. Right. That's my opinion, man. Like, and we need more than motherfucking English professors and philosophers and historians and shit. We need motherfucking people that like psychiatrists who can teach us how to resolve conflict. We need psychologists and counselors and shit who really actually have some practical understanding of methods of how to, solve conflict. One of the ways we can at least start to do the shit is to talk to motherfuckers who, do mediation from war and shit like that. Like, them the motherfuckers we need to holler at, especially among ourselves. But nobody is going into any of these disciplines. We got a whole bunch of motherfuckers like coming out of school and college and shit, and it's a propaganda campaign right now. And a lot of motherfuckers get to virtue signal and grandstand based upon what is hot amongst white folks. And white folks know what they're doing, man. They have a vested interest in a discourse that allows them to appear virtuous, man. And this is part of that. And not to say, like, I'm not saying that people who have gay lives, they should be burned at the stake. Like, they shouldn't. I don't believe they should be murked and hit and beat and shit like that. I don't think they should. But damn, man, don't sit here and throw stones at us and say how fucked up we are and how we part of the problem and how we bought into the patriarchy and how we privileged. If you don't take your white gay ass on with that bullshit, man.
Hey, bro, black, let's be real. Black folks, for all the shit that has taken place in human history, we are the most tolerant motherfuckers on the face of the earth. We're the most tolerant. We accept every fucking thing. Okay? Now, in respect to other groups of people, right? So we got our intolerant individuals among the group, but as a group of people, we are the most tolerant human beings on the face of the planet. That's not debatable. It's not.
But then the question becomes, is the tolerance born out of fear or born out of an inferiority complex, which,
when we ran this motherfucker and these motherfuckers was nasty and had the plague on them. Okay? The motherfuckers had the plague on them and they was disgusting and didn't know how to wash their asses. Okay? Let's talk about it.
What I don't want to do is extend, the conversation to 4 hours, but because we're at the 3 hour mark right now. But
no doubt.
So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is, we're tolerant, but we're even tolerant of our own subordination and it's like, I was listening to some old videos of Curry, man, and I kind of ran across this argument that was made by Ida B. Wells about like guns and people in the black community. And, her argument was every black person should have a Winchester in their house. as a testament to the fact that if one of them white boys come up in here, I mean, you know, it's not the exact words, but if you come up in here, your ass will get shot trying to fucking shoot me.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you try to gun me down, motherfucker, you gonna bite the, and words "bite the dust" were actually used by her. Mm-hmm. He will bite the dust.
Boom, boom, boom.
But the point is, like, how many people are talking like that now? Everybody's talking about inclusion and diversity. Nobody's talking about, if you fuck with me, I'm going to shoot you.
Right. It's all
no, I mean, the only people who are talking, they're making people who talk like that appear to be as dirty and nasty as the Klan. Like, that's ridiculous to me. Like, and this is coming from a woman. Black woman. Like, everybody, all of us need to have guns. You don't hear no talk like that no more. You hear black women, white women, gay people in the black community. Everybody's talking about how fucking oppressed they are and how they need to be included. Nobody's saying this is a cesspool altogether. It needs to be fucking destroyed. Nobody's talking like that. Everybody's like, I want pieces of fucking devil's pie.
Right. Well.
And so, you know, I'm going to leave it with that, man. If you can make one more comment and statement, man, I'm going to give you the last word and I'm out of here, man. I just, the form of resistance that we make to this system can't all be of one kind. And it seems like to me that in today's culture, it's only one way to do justice for us. And it's to talk about identities and who's doing the worst instead of actually challenging the structures of power itself and trying to fucking eradicate the bullshit situation that we find ourselves in. Now go ahead, man. I'm gonna give you the last word, dog.
Now, when you say that, you mean in reference to us eradicating or them eradicating their own power? Because they ain't gonna do that. We know
they're not gonna do that.
So,
but the question is, see, what I've heard from us is, you know, we just want to be equal. We just want inclusion. We just want to survive. We just want to be.
So,
but what you don't have out of the conversation about blackness is a drive, fuck it, to dominate, to run shit.
So I got you. So this is what I've said on my channel. And I usually say it in a gender context, but I mean, I'll also apply it to any context. Okay. And, you know, me and you have had this conversation before. Motherfuckers need to stop negotiating for the other side. Stop that democratic liberal approach to where it's like, oh, let's be bipartisan and let's meet in the middle and this and that and third, because the other side does not do that. They don't give a fuck if you're happy with the arrangement. You understand what I'm saying? Now, black men in particular, their approach to everyone is this way, where, oh, we want to meet in the middle. They approach black women like that. Oh, we just want to meet in the middle. We want shit to work out. We want it to be equal. We want it to just work out. So what they're negotiating is not just what they want from the situation, but then they'll say, well, in the situation that I want to, you know, in the arrangement that I want to have with you, you get this and I get this. Why do you give a fuck? At the end of the day, position yourself, you know, to be, you know, to you know, give yourself leverage, put it that way. Put yourself in an advantageous position.
Leverage your position to get the best you can get. Stop trying to settle for less. Stop trying to compromise with motherfuckers that ain't compromising to begin with.
Yeah, stop trying to compromise. These people are not compromising with you. Black women are not compromising with you. They're not compromising with you. I'm on some Joseph Stalin shit with bitches. Real shit. Okay.
And with that, you made your statement. And it is not that I don't care about you making more statements.
No. That's it. That's enough. There we go.
You have said that's an exclamation point on that.
Yeah.
So I said I'd give you the last word. Gentlemen, we've been doing this for 3 hours. Now, tomorrow I will come back, and I guarantee you, when I come back tomorrow, I'm not going back over shit. I'm starting from where I left off. And if you ain't followed the last show, fuck you. Go back and look at the last show. So, but today, all I'm trying to do this for is to demonstrate what the woke left is thinking, where the ideas are coming from, and to see if there's any validity to anything they say at all. But there's truth in everything. You just got to unpack it. But there's also falsity in a lot. You know, my opinion is, you know, this shit is a choice that people are making. And, you know, maybe, you know, I just can't see in my life me all of a sudden just, you know, like donning the gear of a woman and then acting as if I'm a real fucking lady. I can't even believe anybody would believe it. And, you know, let alone, you know, me being adamant and forceful about the shit. Like, I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. But this is where we are. So at any rate, man, you know, I will holler at you motherfuckers tomorrow, man.
Save yourself, black man.
Yes. So peace out, peoples. I'll holler at y'all.
Peace, 100.